I said, you sit here and you say like, yeah, this could be you, man. Why don't you just write a hit kind of thing? And I'm like, I think I've got 3 hits on this album coming forward. And but whether or not they make it into some mainstream thing or get or make a dent in the music business or industry or whatever, I don't have any illusions about that.
Today we are being joined by Bär from UMLAUT. Bär, how are you doing today?
Great, fantastic, fucking just smashingly splendid. Yes,
Definitely sounds like you're
good.
having a good day. So very excited to have you join us on such an auspicious
Thanks.
day.
Yeah.
Now, to add to the auspiciousness of it all is that we are here to talk about a new album that you are soon to be releasing called, and see if I can get this right, with the umlaut nor, Desolë.
Yeah, it's Desolé. It's just like we just did a stupid umlaut over the last E. Just I don't know, somebody suggested that and I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. Yeah. Anyway, and it's just like, and then it's just all it's probably doing is confusing people. Like, no, that's actually not the right thing of pronunciation or spelling of Desolé. And yeah, anyway, so there we are.
Tell us, yeah, a bit about the album and I guess ultimately your process for putting this one together. Because I understand you've taken a bit of a different approach to the previous output that you've had as a band.
Yeah, well, these songs, I guess, in large part, well, a few of them anyway, were sort of like were things that we were trying to phase into our live set, where it was just like we wanted kind of higher energy things, and we've been a band of like seven, 7 people. It's just been like this kind of like revolving door of members coming in and out, whatever, horn players, and then no horn players, and then it was just like it became such a logistical and scheduling kind of nightmare that I was like, man, let's just be like a kind of a powerful 4 piece where we got keyboards growing out of at least 3 members, 3 players arm, whatever, yeah, bodies, so it's like people kind of having to jump around a little bit, not too much kind of like doubling on instruments. So these songs, and also I was sort of realizing, because like sometimes I have to listen to my old stuff and kind of think of where we've come from, and we sort of came from like a chamber pop kind of instrumental thing primarily, and then we're sort of doing little pop kind of tunes, pop rock things or whatever, for lack of a better description, interspersed within that. And then this latest incarnation was just sort of like I said, sort of a frustration and a thing with just dealing with like extended. I just wanted it to be kind of a. I've always been trying to get back to this kind of being a rock star on some level. I know that sounds gross or maybe kind of whatever, but like in a lot of ways, even at my in my advanced years, I'm sort of like, man, I'd love to be out on tour doing these things, playing at festivals, whatever, this and that, and not that we've ever quite kind of graduated to these levels of things, just because we've all day jobs and we've never really been able to kind of get um, enough of a run up or launch or backing or this or that or whatever, any number of excuses. But I don't know. I always like the idea of like a tight 4 piece band that like sounds huge, and then the bass player isn't always just playing bass, 4 string bass. Sometimes he's playing a Moog, sometimes and sometimes the guitarist is doing some keyboard stuff and then playing a guitar part and then coming back and forth, because that also sort of self arranges for more interesting kind of like music, I feel like. And then it was just the scheduling thing with having a horn section and then like a vibes player and this and that. It just was an absolute nightmare trying to schedule these kind of things and arrange these musicians that I could never really either pay or pay well or whatever. And then like some great Frank Zappa kind of like perfect world. And so anyway, we just ended up with this kind of 4 piece thing, and then Danny had, during the pandemic or somewhere in the pandemic, Danny actually moved down to Melbourne from Sydney, and and then we were sort of kind of slyly sort of phased him into the band, and I was, Danny's kind of like a cat. You don't want to, you don't want to, you know, you have to be kind of subtle with the guy, you know, because you can scare him off pretty easily if you come on too strong with him. So, or at least that's my impression of it, or maybe that's my codependent kind of traits coming through also. But I just never kind of wanted to bother him with my music and my band or whatever. But then like he sort of got phased into it and he enjoyed playing the music and playing with us. So then there he is, and it was like, you know, and I honestly was just like, wow, it took him 20 years to get down here, you know, like we've both been kind of in this country for roughly 20-ish plus years. And it's just kind of funny because he's my favorite drummer, and he's like such a funny guy, and then amazing player, and a really you know, interesting musician. So it's just like it was such a unicorn moment during the pandemic, you know, when not much stuff was happening, or bands were certainly weren't touring as much, you know. On a sort of a side note, I'll mention that during the pandemic, the thing that I kind of loved about it was it, and I even put it in the lyrics of that Valor System song that I did with one of the songs I did with High Castle Tell Orchestra, was that there was no FOMO. Like, so as a touring musician, there wasn't FOMO there for a minute. It was like, oh wow, I kind of had that moment where I was like, oh, everybody's stuck, you know, not touring right now, and then we're all in the same boat. So it's not like it's like, oh well, you see people on tour and you're like, shit, I'd really love to be doing that, or wouldn't that be great, blah blah blah, while I'm plugging along at my day job, um that's unrelated to music. And you sort of go, there's nothing, we're all in the same boat, and there's nothing to be missing out on. And there was something really calming about that I kind of liked. I was like, this is awesome, like finally these fucking bands that had just been, yeah, they're back on the road and they're doing the world tour, and then meanwhile I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs going like, god, I'd love to do that. And people keep asking about, you know, are we ever going to go to Europe? And I'm like, I don't know. I would love to, but we just haven't figured it out. I'm like, I'm probably the best example of how not to do a band, if anything, to the people who are taking notes. So, but how did the album come together? I mean, I guess it was sort of songs that were more straight ahead, more kind of like, because some of them are just unapologetically just like straight down the middle, kind of like rock songs. And I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. Was like how a lot of these songs don't sound anything like what our most of our other catalog sort of looks like, where it's just like very kind of like sophisticated, intricate chamber pop or whatever instrumental kind of stuff that you might call it. And these are more kind of like, I mean, I say dumb rock songs, and I don't mean to insult anybody, especially not the guys who worked on it, or and you know, because I realize that that might come off as a little insulting to those guys, but it's more like coming from the idea of like, if I write a song, it's like I only have kind of limited guitar skills. So if I'm writing a guitar part and then I'm handing it over to Angus or whatever, you know, it's not going to be like the guy from Mars Volta kind of like twitching around on the stage and doing this like, even though Angus might do that to my song in the final analysis of it. You know, it's like it's coming from like, oh yeah, this he has a limited whatever skills on this thing, so it's going to come off. And what I sort of realized as a sort of, if I thought about it, I was like, oh wow, a lot of the music that I was being sort of like marinated, or it was marinating in, either accidentally or otherwise, from like, you know, age 8 until 12, comes through in some of the riffs that I write, where I'm like going like, this sounds like Aerosmith from like the late 70s or something, or not, you know, not to give it too much gravitas or something, or say that it's on the level of somebody of that caliber or something. But it's like, oh, when I come out with these things, or even in the vocal style, the way I sing along to my riffs or whatever, or the ideas that they come up with, it's like it almost has this very, I don't know if it's like and it's the weird thing. It's the weirdest thing to do something, because like people might mistakenly think like, oh, he knows what he wants, and he goes exactly towards it, and then it's like it's really more like body language, or somebody reading body language really well. It's kind of going like, yeah, I can. Everybody in the room. It's like, say, to a certain politician, everybody in the room, or everybody in the world with two brain cells to rub together, can go, oh, that he's lying. He's absolutely lying, or he doesn't realize that he's showing us all his cards with what he's playing. And so what happens is, when I play music, I'll look back at it and go like, oh wow, that's a total ripoff of this, or that's totally derivative of that. And I'm like, and then I only hear it after the fact, and I go, oh wow, you know, like somebody might could probably be like, yeah, actually that's things. I remember there was a song I did way back, uh, like in the late '90s or something. This little song I'd done on a 4 track, and then I had a little melody that was like da 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 dee, da da, and I was like, oh shit! And then Trey actually pointed it out. He's like, that's that song that the the Raging Wrath version of Bungle has been doing covers of. And I'm going like, oh shit! And I was like, I didn't realize it, and I just thought like, oh, this feels kind of like, yeah, this is a good melody, and it's coming out, and I'm not really thinking overthinking it or analyzing it. And then later on, it's like, oh, that's kind of reminiscent or echoes this other thing. How was this one different? I think it's probably different that we I don't know. I think because a lot of the albums or some of the umlaut stuff has been sort of controlled or just recorded primarily by me, and then like I'll bring somebody in, or sometimes I won't even like other people won't even get their hands on it. This one was very much a kind of a group effort, and we just and Angus is a great sort of has a great producer mind, and Danny always has great kind of arrangement ideas. Shane as well, and then it's so I don't really know what's so much different about this, but I feel like it's one of our strongest set of songs that kind of go together as like here's kind of a, I mean, for lack of a better term, a rock band coming at you, and then kind of unapologetically not trying to be too clever, not kind of, it's sort of like they're very straightforward sort of arrangements, and it's not trying to go off and do this navel gazing or agitate the audience with like 20-minute noise jam or some kind of thing so much. It's just kind of boom boom boom, and it kind of hits and quits, if you will. But I don't know if the process is really different from the other albums so much as like Angus is a real stickler for doing things right, for recording with good signal chains and microphones, and not just settling for some MIDI sound or whatever, or a MIDI keyboard thing. It's like, no, it has to be a real thing, and God love him because he's right, and the listener can hear these kind of things, especially in this digital age that we live in. So it's like, but we all know these things are very expensive. So I don't know. In another way, the thing that's different about this album is that I spent a lot of money on it. Whereas other things I just would sort of, favors from friends, and you sort of like scrape by on what you can and do things on the cheap. And this one was like, yeah, there was definitely like, and I just sort of like shrugged my shoulders and just was like, yeah, whatever. We should make a good thing and make it properly. So hopefully people notice that and appreciate that. So I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it does that and much more, because you already touched on several points of other questions that I was going to bring up, and I was actually quite amazed how you kind of ran with each section of that question and then still managed to come back and remember other little parts of the question that I asked you and bring it back in.
Hopefully, yeah, yeah.
Well done. So maybe the next question isn't so loaded, but then again, it could be. Uh, yeah, your choice to move to Australia. What inspired you to quote unquote make the sea change and move to Australia? And how have you felt living here for the last decade plus?
Yeah. Well, look what's happening in America right now. Answer the question. No, no, actually, it wasn't. I'm not even. I'm. I always am the first to admit that I don't know what the hell is going on or what I'm doing, and I just kind of bumble through life, and then I ended up in Australia. Like some people, when my family is going through drama, the family that I was raised, anyway, in California, and like with like our parents kind of like getting aging out and dying, and then dementia and Alzheimer's and these kinds of things, and then the family kind of like cannibalizing itself a little bit. You're like, Jesus Christ. Sorry. No, but it's just like when there's kind of family dramas and kind of interfamily kind of like problems, people go like, well, you did the right thing by going to Australia. And it's like, I didn't design this. It just happened. I met a girl in the 90s while I was on tour with Secret Chiefs. I think it was in 98. And then stayed in touch, and then had a long distance sort of relationship. And the next thing you know, we have we have two kids that are now grown. Well, they're in their early 20s anyway, and like, and at the time we were like, we went back to California, and that was right after 9/11, and it was like, it was such a warmongering kind of like scary time, very similar to what's, happening even today. Not that people are warmongering, but it was just like, and she wasn't very impressed by that, and just this the services with like a poor kind of like young family in California were just so egregious and terrible, that her experience was just really, it wore off, it wore very thin on her, my kid's mom, very quickly. And then so basically we came back to Australia as soon as we could, and then here we are, all 20 odd years later. And and especially with what's going on over there politically, it's pretty scary for people. And and I was saying to Danny, like, I think just yesterday or something, I was like, I could not be happier that we're where we are right now. And not that these things can't happen in Australia as well or whatever, but it just feels like a safer place to be, where it's like there's more kind of rule of law and due process and whatnot. So, and sorry, what was the last part of that question? What was it been like for me? You were asking?
Yeah, yeah. Um, Seeing, well, pretty much like what you're saying, being in one sense sort of so close to what's happening in the States, because of said obviously got family and friends and everything over
Yeah.
there, and especially given another recent round of riots in Los Angeles. But then, like you said, being also somewhat safely removed from it all, like literally dodging a bullet by being in Australia. Or a
Yeah.
rubber bullet,
Yeah.
to be a little
It's
bit more topical.
Yeah. And it's funny because, again, that wasn't anything by design, and it wasn't like I was going, even back in 2000, in the early 2000s, we came back, because I think came here in 2002, towards the end of 2002. By the time we were able to get back, it wasn't only because of this, like, weapons of mass destruction and let's go in and whatever, and we got we were some kind of like, there was some kind of political thing. It was just more like, just the basic stuff of, like, just the social services here in Australia work like exponentially better, and the whole system for navigating, at least at the time, are that much easier and better. They're that much more supportive of families and young families and whatever. And so that was kind of what got us here and landed us here. And then it's just like, I mean, it's been great. Like, Melbourne has like is such a vital and creative city, and there's so many venues and all this kind of thing. It's like, we could have done so much worse. We were just living in like a small Northern California town before we got back here to Melbourne. And it was like, I mean, it was a college town, which was cool, Arcata, but it was also just kind of very strange and weird, and not easy. But it's been great being here, and there's been so many great musicians and whatnot. But I mean, part of the thing is like, with Danny and me being here in Australia, it's like we're a little bit out of sight, out of mind with like a certain band that we were associated with in the 90s, where it's just like, sometimes people think it's like, I don't know, Danny and Bear are so far away. And it's like, it's easy to kind of to write us off, not really write us off, but I don't know. I think in people's minds, they might think like doing music, I don't know. It's sort of an interesting thing. And again, I'd have to like ask Trevor and Trey, like, so, but there's other things happening with that, with that entity, where I'm trying to kind of like, I'm trying to I'm trying to I've got things in the works with people, where I'm trying to kind of like make things happen that, yeah, despite these geographical kind of issues. And then, but anyway, we'll see how that goes. But I mean, yeah, being in Australia has been awesome, because there's so many, because people, it was interesting when I was first here in the early 2000s, like, you just this association with Bungle and whatnot, kind of like, people would like kind of put you on this pedestal and go like, oh my god, because Bungle, right before it sort of unceremoniously imploded or whatever in 2004, um we were still get like gaining momentum on like becoming like a bigger thing, and like we still didn't really get it's like anything. We didn't really get the launch or the run up or whatever, even though that the California tours were pretty successful and pretty legendary for what they were. But it still felt like that band was evolving into just to another thing and getting ready. And then of course, like, after I got back to Australia in the early 2000s, like, and then with two young children to look after and whatnot, like that was one of my most creative periods. Was just like, when a child's in utero and then you're sitting around with like a keyboard with an inbuilt six track and you just like stacking, making your little ideas and putting them onto a thing. And I'm going like, I came up with more ideas. And I think I finally figured out how to write like music kind of after Mr. Bungle had sort of like fizzled out, certainly, after that last California European tour. And then even into 2004, like from whatever the end of what is it, the end of 2000 into 2004, it was really, really sort of my most creative period. And like that, and a lot of that stuff ended up on that first UMLAUT album, as far as like ideas and whatnot. So and it's just because I'm kind of a late bloomer. It's one of these things. It goes back to these things of like, I wish I could go into like a job interview and go like, yeah, so I'm a slow learner. I don't do well under pressure, and and I'm also a late bloomer. It's just this kind of thing, and it's like, which is, I guess it could be seen as a positive thing. It's kind of like keep going, keep trying, don't give up, all these cliches. But for me, it's really true. And for whatever reason, I didn't really kind of come into my own until I was into my 30s, which was, in the early 2000s or whatever. And I was just going like, and I remember I kept sending ideas to the Bungle guys, trying to kind of go like, look, man, I got some good shit, like for whatever we might do or could do or whatever. And then for whatever reason, like stuff hadn't healed, little issues between certain peoples hadn't healed yet, or was still too raw or whatever. And so it ended up on that first Doom record or whatever. Um, but I think it's like, I'm a real sucker for, as far as like to answer your question, as far as going like how is this process different for this album? It was like it's very kind of mainstream in a way. I guess I hate to say, but also I don't give a shit to say, because it's like with the people I work with for my day job, they I'll literally hear a Faith No More song come on the radio, and they'll go like, you man. They'll be flicking the shit, knowing my history and where I'm from and this thing, and like could have been you. And I'm like, and I'll go over to him and I'll be short of like getting him into a headlock, and I'll go, listen, fucko. And sorry if if you're not allowed to curse on this thing, but I'm like, I have proof of concept. If I have nothing else, if I'm not the guy that's like raiding around the world or traipsing around the world and like, flopping around on state world stages, I'm like, I've got proof of concept. And I was sort of saying that to somebody, like, I said, you sit here and you say like, yeah, this could be you, man. Why don't you just write a hit kind of thing? And I'm like, I think I've got 3 hits on this album coming forward. But whether or not they make it into some mainstream thing or get or make a dent in the music business or industry or whatever, I don't have any illusions about that. But I'm like, no, these are like bona fide like bangers where it's like yeah, I've got proof of concept, even if I maybe don't have the yacht or the sports cars or whatever to show for it.
And few do. So speaking
That's
of,
so
yeah,
shameless and gross sounding, I know, but
oh, that's all right. If you do get the yacht, I expect an invite to the party. That's all I'm going to say about that. But back
100%.
back to the hits. The
Proof of
first
concept.
one,
I just don't have the money. I've got proof of concept. Yeah.
the first taste of the album that you've made public is for a track called "Happy Now." So yeah, why was that one chosen to represent the album?
I don't know. I think it was kind of this one of these things where I was even thinking about how funny this is, that we're like you go with a label or somebody's like, you got to do it right, meaning you got to have vinyl, you got to release vinyl, and then I'm just gonna see if my phone's gone on the battery. Okay, and then you kind of go, and then there's like this sort of like a committee, not a committee, but there's like people, there's a PR person working for us, and then it kind of goes into this quick thing, and it's not even something that we really plan out so much, like, all right, this is what we're gonna do, and it's gonna fit in this lane, and it's gonna appeal to these people, and it's gonna like, you're going to get your, your return on investment or blah, blah, blah. It's like, here's the thing that the focus group said it's going to be the most whatever. It's just that it was kind of like, all right, it's kind of represents the vibe of the album a little bit. But, truth be told, I don't think it's actually one of the stronger tracks on the album.
but not
Which
one
is
of the
funny
hits.
as a thing to like somebody like, oh, they're the singles because we released like Bite Your Tongue during the pandemic and then this Every Time track during the pandemic, which are more kind of like let's lead off with these. And I was almost thinking like it's been so long and people have such short memories with whether it's these smartphone attention spans or the whatever or just the news cycle. I felt like going thinking we should just release Bite Your Tongue again, um, because it's such kind of like it's such a catchy kind of like go for no holds barred or whatever, if that's the phrase. It's just sort of like, yeah, it's just kind of doing that like satisfying kind of like upper mid tempo kind of rock song, that sort of represents what a little bit what the vibe of the album is in a way. um so Happy Now, and again, it's meant to have like a question mark at the end of the phrase, and I think I noticed that there wasn't like a question mark like Happy Now, like because it's meant to be a little bit more sort of like cheeky. It's not like a declarative thing of like I'm happy now. It's like my fiance, we have this joke
Finally.
where like we have this joke sometimes where she'll be like somebody might be like, "Well, how's your day?" And it's like, "Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of blah blah blah." And it's just like somebody might be like, "Hey, don't be sad," and she's like, "Okay, I'm happy now." And she says this as in a sarcastic thing, like when we say these things that are just a nice thing to say to each other, it's just sort of like it's kind of like telling an angry person to calm down. It's just like that's never going to work. It's only going to make that. It's going to, it's probably going to make the person more angry or something. Certainly, and I'll admit that being that I do that as well. It's like, oh my god, did somebody just tell me to calm down? And it like I can just feel my like heart pounding and whatever. But the Happy Now track was when I thought of it, I kind of, and again, it was an afterthought of like, oh really, this one? I was like, okay, I guess of the ones we've got, we don't want to like. And I don't even know. I'm just sort of like I listen to it, and I even have to like when somebody's like, "Oh, let's release Happy Now," and then I listen back to it, and I'm like, "Huh, was this the one that we really wanted to be the first one out the gate to do the?" Because really, it's just it was almost arbitrary in a way for me, and I was like, "Okay, sure, why not? Let's try this," because again, I'm not a marketing person, and I don't know what people will latch onto or this or that, and then we do a version of Cold Store, which was recorded during the Disco Volante era, but just wasn't on any of the Bungle albums. And I'm sure people have heard it, the bootleg version on YouTube or something. But and Angus was kind of going like, "Oh, wish that maybe that one should be the one." And I was like, that's not really a. It's more of a kind of like a three-fourths the way into an album. It's almost like a kind of like here's a curiosity. It's not really the thing that's gonna like pull the album along and like and it doesn't. And I was even kind of reluctant to have Cold Sore even be on the album. A little bit. So it's just like just because I'm just like I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know if this is even good or whatever. So but there it is. People are going to be so confused by this. So like, this guy doesn't know what he wants, does he? And they're not wrong, but it was kind of almost like an arbitrary thing. But it was like I think the guy that is helping with PR was sort of like maybe this would be the one to go with. I'm like, okay, sure, because it's got a bit of energy to it. But yeah, I don't have any illusions, or I don't think it's like, yeah, this is really taking the genres the categories that it falls into in new directions, or it's redefining music in whatever kind of thing or this or that. So it's just like I'm like, all right, yeah, sure, okay. So, and kind of knowing with the knowledge that people are going to really latch on to other songs in the album when it finally drops, and they're going to be like, oh, this one, yes, because I can already see it where people are going to be like latching more onto a lot of the other songs, but this is the kind of the first one sort of kicking the door down in a way. And so if that's what it's the purpose that it's serving, then so be it. Yeah,
Oh
it is
yeah,
what it
like
is.
she
No,
said, it's the album's coming out on the 25th of this month, so it's not too long till people are going to be
well,
have,
of
have it
July, I
in.
think.
Oh, sorry.
Month, but July.
Oh,
It's
I'm
next month actually.
bringing them on. All right, so I'll edit that one around. It's only going to be a month and 10 days till people have that record in their hands. Bär, unfortunately, we are out of time. I've enjoyed speaking with you so much. Hopefully, we can catch up again at another time because I'd really love to talk touring with you.
Man, it was great to meet you.